So welcome back. That was a kind of a spooky video. I think it was parts of it were fairly obvious where the decisions were didn't quite go right. But let's open it up first to the room here. And what are your guys' impression about that AOPA video? Anybody? I guess it's that obvious, huh? I was just telling Ian as we're standing up here, I always get a little bit nervous when I see what I perceive to be mind reading, even in an accident report, when they're suggesting that there was some social pressure on the head of the pilot to try to press ahead. I don't know if there's any way to really know that. You can kind of deduce it maybe a little bit, but what's the biggest and most obvious mistake that this jet made? VFR and IMC, not only VFR and IMC, but VFR and IMC without an instrument rating. Yeah, Lauren? He certainly also didn't check the en route forecast clearly. Say that again, George. Oxygen, certainly an issue. Best case, he had 4 oxygen plugs for 5 people. So it's always one of those things that I read in the FARs that the pilots need the oxygen more than passengers do. Not if I'm a passenger in that airplane. I'm sorry, I'm not a second-class citizen when it comes to O2. So there's issues there. Presumably he was on O2, but maybe not everybody else was. And the autopilot. I mean, the fundamental causal factor in the last game was loss of control of the aircraft. And if he'd been able to turn the autopilot on, maybe they would have made it. So as usual, as Roger would have said, talking about any kind of mishap, it's always a chain. And there's always one thing that if you do it differently, you'll probably break the chain and solve the problem. But the biggest thing, of course, was flying IMC flying into IMC without an instrument rating at all. Lauren, you have something else? So I'm looking at my phone here at the chat. Does anybody have anything from online that they want to comment about this? Not seeing anything. Okay, like I said, this one seems kind of straightforward. I think hopefully the big lesson is, get your instrument rating. Don't fly into clouds if you don't have it. And one thing we saw last week actually was, or last time we did one of these things, was a pilot who had his instrument rating, was not current, was able to kind of get by. If you recall that incident where the pilot flew in and was running out of gas, but he got into the clouds, didn't seem to be able to hold his heading, but at least he kept the airplane upright. So one thing I tell people that, outside the program, that if they're private pilots, at least get your instrument rating so you have it in your back pocket if you need it. Don't depend on it. Don't go flying into clouds deliberately. But if you get trapped, even as a VFR pilot with an instrument rating you've used for a while, your odds of living through it go up tremendously. And even better, of course, is to get an instrument rating and then continue to use it. Donnie?
Yeah, getting your instrument ticket clearly is the ultimate goal, but obviously there is a underestimation by VFR pilots at how hard instrument flying is. I can fly straight level, I'll be able to handle it. It's just, I think, especially with just 4 hours, you don't have enough exposure to know how hard it actually is.
Yeah, what Donnie's pointing out here in the barn here is that if you've never flown on instruments, you have no real understanding of how hard it can be. So again, I don't think it's such an issue for this group, because most of us, I think all of us, are going through some instrument training. I'm doing the helicopter instrument flying right now, and I would say that helicopter instrument flying is the degree harder than airplane instrument flying. That airplane instrument flying is over VFR. It's really challenging because the helicopter is so unstable. So it's something you just have to practice all the time. So I think with this crowd, flying at IMC without that rating is not so much an issue. But be aware, as I said, I'm cautious about mind reading, but be aware of that whole social pressure thing. I've been in a situation where I was in that potential social pressure, but I've been around long enough to know that. And one of these days I'll do a brief on how I didn't kill myself, my buddy, and his new bride, flying away from their wedding. I mean, that was a newspaper article waiting to be written, but everything went fine because I was aware of what was going on. So. But anyway, I don't want to take any more time away from Ian. He's going to talk to us about the rotary wing side of the house. So give me a second to reset the slides and we'll get going. Thank you.
just gonna,
This has got my notes on it, so can I just
you can do
sit
whatever
this
you,
right here
you
and
can
move
do
to
whatever
that?
you want, buddy. You're on. Just tap the screen.
Okay. Just remember to put the mic up.
Whoops, let's go back. Okay, good afternoon. My name's Ian Selby, and Professor Waters asked me to come present 2 times when I almost killed myself. I've thought about these experiences a lot over the years, so I'm just going to go ahead and tell the stories. I know that this is mostly general aviation, and so you may not know what a ready room is, but in the military, Navy, Marine Corps, I assume Air Force is the same. There's a room like this with high back chairs, and people hang out in it and drink coffee and share experiences like this where they almost pranked an airframe. And hopefully, and I learned a lot in there by the mistakes that other people made and tried to commit them to memory, saying, boy, I hope I don't do that. Or, hey, this is how that guy got out of this situation. My water polo coach used to call it free learning. He'd be shouting at a guy in the pool, and if you were on the bench, you could learn for free what this guy was learning at an expense. So that's why I put that in there as well. Here's like, this is my background. I feel like it's kind of silly, but you have to show it. So I was born in Tacoma, Washington, and don't let anybody tell you sports can't do amazing things for you. I happen to be really good at water polo. And I was an all-state water polo player, and I swear it got me into the Naval Academy because my grades weren't quite that great. And while I was there, I majored in aerospace engineering, and at service selection, I chose the Marine Corps, which not everybody does. It's only like 15% that choose that. I flew Cobras. This is the AH-1 Whiskey model. They're flying the Zulu now, which has 4 blades. I did that for 9 years. Then when I got out, not pictured here, I apprenticed myself to a master violin maker up in Pennsylvania, and I built violins for 6 years. I was an apprentice for 4, and then when I became a journeyman, he hired me, and I built stuff and repaired and restored for him for 2 years. Then, because obviously that's not very lucrative, I went back to the cockpit. And now, for the last 5 years, I have been a medevac pilot with the Maryland State Police. That's us on, I think, 70 a couple of winters ago, picking somebody up. We do primarily medevac. It's like maybe 70 to 80% of what we do. The rest of it is search and rescue, to include hoist rescue. And we do a lot of law enforcement. I am coming off of a night shift where we flew twice last night, so you got to pardon the probably unhealthy caffeine level that's keeping me upright right now.
If I know that, man, I would have let you go first.
No, it's okay. It's all right. I am going to go home and sleep, though, because I have another one tonight. But anyway, I love flying with MSP. Helping people is very rewarding. And it's an awesome airframe and an awesome group of missions. I came to CCBC last year to get my multi-engine rating using my GI Bill, just like a lot of you guys. That's why I'm here. So let's start with the first one. This is, I realize that this is, once again, not general aviation. This is very military centric. So if I use acronyms or talk about things that you guys just aren't familiar with, but first off, who is in any Rotary Wing program? Okay, excellent. And so for you airplane drivers, if you have any questions about why we're doing some stuff, please just don't hesitate to stick up your hand. I'll take questions as they come. I'll try and explain stuff because I realize a lot of the ordnance stuff is not familiar to everybody. So we're both newly designated aircraft commanders, or PICs, I think if I remember correctly, I was in the front seat. It was at night, as all good mishaps are. We were on night vision goggles. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar what those are like, but they're big tubes. They come down in front of your eyes. Everything is green. It does make you see better with a 40-degree field of view. So you can't see your periphery. It's all black, but you can look underneath them at the instruments, through them, and see the objective area. And then, do you know what that's all about?
Yeah, I think I maybe showed something.
Okay. So anyway, you look through them to see your objective area, and there's limited depth perception. So you got to use mental cues to figure out, I know what size a car is roughly, so I kind of know how far away that car is. Stuff like that. We're shooting 2.75-inch rockets, which are, it's just basically a rocket tube, and they've got these screw-on warheads, so you can change the warheads. We were shooting an illumination warhead, infrared type, so that it only aided the people in the objective area who had goggles on, and the enemy presumably did not. Lead was shooting HE frag warheads. So high explosive, sorry. The illumination rocket stuff here, 1 million candle power for 100 seconds. It falls at, well, I should describe what happens. This thing basically shoots up. You try and get it to deploy over the objective area. It pops open a parachute, and then there's a flare hanging underneath the parachute. And for 100 seconds, it falls at 13 feet per second over the target area. And there's 13 and a half seconds between when you let the thing go and when it pops. And so all that, you can see, you try and time your actions in the objective area so that lead, well, here, let's move to the next slide. So this was our planned objective area. This is actually a map of where it happened. This is actually Camp Pendleton, California, the whiskey range there. And I will attempt to lay it out for you. The target is the red crosshair. Because it is on Camp Pendleton, there's a range fan. So you have to fire within certain run-in headings. And those are delineated by the red left and right marker. I'm the blue aircraft here. We're -2, so we're the wingman. -1 is lead, and he's the green arrow. And the objective was, lead was the attack element. I'm the illumination element in blue. Once again, we've got these restricted firing headings. We flew over, as a section, we flew over the range to make sure it was clear.
And the section is 2 aircraft.
Yeah, section is 2 aircraft. So, yeah, perfect. Please keep jumping in when I skip stuff like that. So, anyway, so we had to fly over the range to make sure it was clear. There were frequently herds of buffalo that were all over the range, and you couldn't shoot at the buffalo. So we flew over, then we split. You can see that our plan as the illumination element was to make this big arcing blue turn and then hit our run-in heading and then let the illumination flare go. And as it floated down over the target, that's when lead would come in on his green arrow, and he would hit the target with rockets and then guns. And then we would join up for another section L attack, which is basically kind of the same orientation you see here, but we're covering leads. -2 is covering leads pull-off. Then this, okay, the preferred delivery profile for illumination rockets. So this is my aircraft. is 100 knots on the run-in heading, master arm, which arms the laser. You laser range the target. When you get to 4,000 meters, you pitch to 20 degrees nose up, and which is, I don't know, it's pretty extreme in a helicopter. 20 degrees nose up, fire the rockets, recover wings level, egress, and join up with lead for the section L attack. That's what we were supposed to do. This is what we actually did. Coming around that blue turn that you see, the flying pilot in my aircraft in the back seat was bleeding off airspeed. He was overly focused on making sure he was on his run-in heading and on the north side of that range fan, which aren't marked on the ground, by the way. He was at about, I noticed it. He was, I have to say, I actually noticed it, and I didn't say anything. He was at 70 knots when he went into that 20 degrees nose up pitch up. He launched the rockets at about 0 airspeed, and then as soon as they left the rail, we tail slid, just like that, dropped out of the sky. I took controls, leveled the nose, pulled the collective all the way to the stop. Sorry, it's getting me juiced just thinking about it. I heard we drooped the rotor. We over-torqued the snot out of that aircraft, both transiently and statically. I didn't see what it was because I was looking at the ground. I heard both engines droop. As I was moving my head down and to the right to see what was below us, they went past the radar altimeter and it was going to 0 at about like that. Thankfully, we maintained tail rotor effectiveness. So in a helicopter, when your main rotor slows below its speed, below its nominal speed, that's okay down to a point, but the tail rotor is mechanically connected to the main rotor at about roughly like a four times the rotation speed. And so when you lose, a percentage of main rotor authority, you lose a much larger tail rotor authority percentage, which causes you to swap ends.
So Ian,
yeah.
for the airplane only folks,
Yes.
basically what happened is you got nose high.
Yeah.
Pretty much stalled.
Yes, we basically stalled.
Slid backwards. By pulling collective all the way up, you went to.
I went to max power, and
basically
well,
like shoving the
pitched,
throttle, shoving the throttle in.
Yeah.
Sort of swapped ends a little bit, and.
But the helicopter operates off of a kind of a closed loop demand system. So basically my control with the collective was not the engines, it was with the main rotor. And so I was able to add as much pitch to the blades as I could. The engines tried to keep up with that demand and keep the main rotor going at its nominal speed, and they couldn't do it, which over-torques the transmission. And yeah, I saw the grass, but we didn't hit it. So, learning points. Anybody got any? Go ahead.
Were you the pick or second?
I don't remember, honestly. We were both very new picks. And I think they were putting us together so that we could get stuff like this out of our system.
It was good crew coordination.
It was. Yeah, but I would prefer, and this is my main learning point, that I speak up. I saw that we were slow. I should have been able to know how that was going to turn out. I should have said something. I mean, if I'd said, hey, you're getting a little slow, you're at 70 knots, I don't know, I could have said anything, and he would have, I mean, I basically, like I said, I failed as a co-pilot. He would have known he was slow, he would have fixed it, he could have aborted the run, we could have reset our time on target. We could have tried again. It was only training. We're shooting at a white rock on Camp Helm. There's no one shooting back. you know, he might have been watching his airspeed and let him go a little sooner, which would have given us more energy. Anyway, and he wouldn't have been surprised. He was completely unaware. I mean, he was totally surprised, like, what are you doing? Kind of surprised when I took the controls. So,
that sounds to me like almost equivalent to task saturation in IFR.
yeah, he was task saturated by trying to hit his run-in heading and stay within the range fan,
Right. So
and then deliver the rockets properly.
right. In instrument training, we talk about the error of omission, and it sounds like he, you know, omitted his airspeed in the course of doing that maneuver. One of the comments online is aviate, navigate, communicate, illuminate.
I like that. That's great. Okay, let me catch up on my notes here. Okay, we're going to move on to the next scenario unless someone's got something else they want to talk about. This is when I was forced to consider ditching over the Gulf of Aden. This one actually I think was much scarier. But anyway, that's what the view looks like through night vision goggles. It's kind of grainy. It's all green. Makes it seem like you're underwater or something. But anyway, they're awesome. Absolutely awesome. So it was in 2001. I was on a deployment with the 13th Marine Expeditionary Unit. Basically means on a boat. I was on the USS Bella Wood. We were off the east coast. Well, we were off the coast of Djibouti, which is east side of Africa, just south of Yemen and north of Somalia. We were doing a division attack in the bomb box. A division is 4 ships, 2 sections. So there's a lead and his wingman, and then there's another lead and his wingman. And you can split up differently and do all kinds of stuff that way. Bomb box is basically our range there. It was a huge area between 2 east-west running ridges, and you could shoot anything in between them. It was great. There were no run-in headings. You could come in from any direction. It was just desert around there anyway. And all the natives knew to stay away. So it wasn't like we were chasing buffalo away. So it was a hazy, low light level night. So the way night vision goggles work is they amplify ambient light. So whatever light is out there, I don't care what the source is, man-made, natural, moonlight, starlight, it all comes into the goggles, and then the goggles multiply that effect to create the image that you see. When there is no ambient light, like on a low light level night, with significant haze and overcast, you get what's called scintillation. And that's when you get like it looks like snow on a TV. It's sparkly. And it's your indicator that it's really dark.
Yeah. Scintillation in night vision goggles basically means it's so dark that the goggles are sort of turning up the gain so much. Now you're getting into noise. It's like you're listening to a radio station and you can barely hear it because of the static. So you just turn it up louder. So yeah, you can hear what you're trying to hear, but you're listening to more static. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's
it means
exactly it.
You're at the edge of your ability to use your goggles.
Yeah. And the Cobra, it was like he's discovering a horrible instrument platform. And I don't know if it was something with the stability augmentation system or what it is. In flight school, in the one of the jet rangers basically that we flew, I was a great IFR pilot. That thing was nice and steady and smooth and didn't go all over the place. And I didn't understand why Cobra pilots in general were not interested in flying IMC. You could do it, but man, it was a lot of work. And you got vertigo even before you went into the clouds. It was that vertigo inducing. You could see the wall coming, and you knew what your clearance was, and you'd just sit there and stare at the attitude gyro, and you'd still get vertigo. That's going to play a part. And ditching. Who knows why anyone would ever ditch an aircraft into the water, especially a helicopter, which turns upside down as soon as it hits the water?
You're running out of gas.
Yeah, you've got an impending power failure or a land immediately emergency procedure. I mean, it's basically safer to do that than it is to stay with the aircraft. So this is a really bad situation. It's better than an auto rotation. So those of you who've flown an auto rotation in a helicopter, you know, it can do it, but your hand is forced. You're going down a very specific glide path, and you get one chance at the bottom. Hopefully you pull the collective at the right time, and hopefully you practice. And in the water, it's worse. You can't like slide it on, you know.
And you also, your depth perception of water is going to be really
Oh yeah, especially low light level with scintillating goggles, and yeah, it's terrible. Yeah, when do you flare? You're basically looking at the radar or the radar altimeter. We didn't have floats like a lot of modern helicopters do. So we were gonna sink like a stone as soon as it hit the water. And helicopters inherently, because they have a very high center of gravity with the transmission up there, they always turn over. And so the procedures were to make a mayday call, squawk 7700, broadcast your lat long in the blind, do an approach to a hover, open both the canopies, because when you hit the water, you didn't want the airframe to twist and jam one of them closed, trapping you inside. We had canopy knives, but no one really wanted to use them. Your co-pilot would activate the strobe on his vest and jump out and pull his beaded handle to inflate his vest as soon as he hit the water. And then the aircraft commander, who drew the short straw basically, would taxi far enough away that he was sure he wasn't going to injure the co-pilot, but close enough so that he thought they could link up again afterwards. Secure one engine, settle into the water. We always said we'd roll it over to the right as you know we started to lose main rotor effectiveness, and that was because the blade coming around the Cobra, the blades rotate counterclockwise, like most American helicopters. So you were hoping that the blade on the right-hand side, as it came forward, would hit the water, and the transmission, which sat right behind you, would tear out of its mounts to the rear instead of into you, which would happen maybe if you went to the left. You egress the helicopter, pull your beads on your vest. We did have HEEDS bottles, which are tiny little scuba tanks. I think they're good for like 10 to 15 breaths. 5 minutes. Yeah, 5 minutes. Once again, something no one else wanted to try. I put at the bottom of this list, it is a low success maneuver. All of this. Yeah, so this is not something you want to try, but you got to plan for it. So anyway, next slide. Okay, so this is what happened. We did our attack in the bomb box. It went fine. We joined up in combat cruise, which is formation flight, but really loose. You know, you're flying a bearing, but there's some flexibility in it. But basically, if you're the wingman, if you're lead, you're just flying along. If you're the wingman, you're looking at the guy you're flying off of and following him. And we held over the beach while lead updated the ship's position. We should have noticed at this point that it was extremely difficult. So while we say we held, means we were doing like racetrack orbits over the beach. And we should have noticed that every time the flight was over the land, everyone was looking at lead, and it was very disorienting because there was nothing behind him. No land, no horizon, no stars, nothing at all to tell you which way was up. So that's the no contrast part.
So you're basically flying IFR formation off lead for 10-ish minutes.
Yes.
Wow.
And that obviously you'll see here later on, that doesn't work out very well. So we were flying division combat cruise form with no horizon. We went feet wet. We figured out where the boat said they were. We went feet wet, which just means you just go over the water. Within about 10 minutes, all the formation just completely broke up. Nobody could sustain their position off of lead. All the air crews were fighting just incapacitating vertigo. We call it docking on the space shuttle because the space shuttle flies around the Earth upside down, right? But it doesn't matter, it's a space shuttle. It feels like that when you are flying formation off of someone with nothing else in your field of view to tell you which way is up. You literally lose all orientation, and it feels like you're docking on the space shuttle because you might be upside down. Who knows? We each separately, all four of us separately, tried to get an IFR recovery to the boat. The boat has PAR and ASR approaches, so they're basically, for those who don't have an instrument rating, I don't even know, there aren't many of those left, are there?
Left.
Yeah.
At Navy Marine Corps bases.
Yeah. Well, basically, it's a controller who looks at a radar screen and he calls your every move. He says, come left 10 degrees, come right 10 degrees, start, you're on glide slope, and, going above glide slope, going below glide slope. It's a talk you in kind of approach. And the boat has these, but they were overloaded landing a division of Harriers. And the boat was not where it's supposed to be. Sorry if there's any Navy SWOs in the room, but or surface warfare officers, but man, those guys. I'll stop. So I said shocker. We were able to DF the boat using the ADF needle. You can tune it to the same frequency they're talking on, and it would point toward the boat whenever they talked. And so that was helpful to know we were headed in the right direction, but we had no mileage. It's just an ADF needle. It's not DME or anything like that. We tried to use the FLIR to see the boat. However, one, that forced the guy in the front seat to put his head down because the FLIR comes like the visual scope. It comes out of the floor, kind of like the Bombardier Navigator scope in the A6, So the poor guy already has vertigo, and now he's got to put his head in this scope and use a joystick to search around the ocean with the FLIR. Also, the next generation of FLIR on the Cobra, the Zulu, is much more advanced, and it does much better under these conditions. But the one we were flying was designed by the Israelis and works great in a dry desert. It does not work well in a humid environment, so we couldn't see anything. And on top of that, all of our fuel ladders were coming up short. So you build a fuel ladder, it just says, what your fuel state should be at all these different points in the mission, so you know when you're falling behind and when you're staying with it. So we're running low on fuel, our low caution lights come on, we go to our bucket airspeed, which is basically your max conserve airspeed. I think it was 80 knots. I'm kind of guessing there. Okay, so this is a bit melodramatic now, but it was really scary when I was there, so I feel like I've earned it. So midnight over shark-infested waters of the Gulf of Aden with no boat in sight and only 8 minutes of fuel till splash, we really did set a bingo for executing a planned ditch in order to avoid a surprise auto rotation into the water. And it sucked. I didn't even get a t-shirt. So here's the resolution. We were lucky. We found a boat. All four aircraft had limited maneuvering with both fuel low caution lights on. When you get to a certain low fuel level, you risk starving one of the boost pumps in the base of the fuel cell by even 10-degree angle of bank. I forget what the actual number was now because it was so long ago, but we really had limited maneuvering with both of those low caution lights on. And all four aircraft recovered with about 6 to 8 minutes worth of fuel left. And I did actually kiss the flight deck. This dovetails nicely with our AOPA thing. Don't try to fly VFR without a horizon, especially formation. Now, I have to caveat this. The Navy and the Marine Corps do actually teach IFR form flight, but you are very tight on lead, and it's a maneuver that you're supposed to use to get yourself, if you have a navigation sort of failure and you need someone to lead you down through the clouds, you can actually fly form off of them and get down. But it is not something anybody practiced, and it is certainly undesirable in a Cobra. So we should have noticed that it was very difficult when we were feet dry to see, get our bearing off of lead. We should have broke up there. We could have individually recovered to the Djibouti International Airport, which was just south of us. And we would have had to spend the night in a tent, but nothing wrong with that. It wasn't like we hadn't been doing that anyway. And never trust the shoes. So in the Navy, the shoes in the Navy are the ship drivers. They wear black shoes. All the aviators wear brown shoes. And so the aviators refer to the ship drivers as shoes. And they never seem like they know or care where the ship is in relation to where they said it would be. So we got so that we really didn't trust them. Fuel ladder. That's a pretty interesting one, actually. Anybody have any thoughts?
One thing I'm thinking of that you take into account the fact that your fuel burn is going to be higher is a wingman down lead.
No, but it is all back to fuel burn. And yes, Dash 2 and Dash 4 had significantly lower fuel states than lead and Dash 3.
Yeah. For you guys that haven't done it, when you're flying in a wing position in formation, you're moving your throttles around a lot more. So over the course of an hour or two, you're going to burn more gas than the lead is. So, and the lead is the guy who's running the whole issue. So he needs to be aware that whatever he sees on his fuel gauge, the guy that he's responsible for is seeing less.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think the one that really bit us was that all of our fuel ladders were built on the standard burn rate of 800 pounds an hour, which gives you about 7.5 minutes per 100 pounds. So basically I had that rule of thumb in my head. I could look, however many 100 pounds I had, I could multiply by 7, and that's how many minutes I had. I rounded down personally. But anyway, because of temperature, humidity, and density altitude, we were way, way higher than that. And I'm thinking I can only guess because I can't recreate the atmospheric conditions, but I'm thinking we were like between 1,000 and 1,200 pounds an hour, where 100 pounds of fuel only gets you 5 minutes. So we were falling short for a long time, and we should have noticed. And that bit us all significantly. I think we had a headwind as well. We had one of the first aircraft installed versions of the GPS. So it knew where we were, but it wasn't like the modern ones that actually calculate your drift and can sense where the winds are from and take that into account. So I think we had a headwind. Plus, we were all loaded for bear because we just did an attack. So, you know, we've got rocket pods on the wing stations and tow launchers, just tons of parasitic drag. We did debrief with the approach controllers on the boat and say, hey, listen, if we, you know, if we need it, we need you guys to handle us and get us in. And they admitted that they were overloaded with the Harriers. And we came up with, well, you know, we probably should have declared some sort of urgency state. Basically, the boat was surprised that we all came roaring in super low on fuel. They didn't even know, you know, and, you know, maybe the air boss could have done something to hook us up if the air boss is the guy who runs the flight deck. And he has a direct line to the captain and maybe a little more influence there. But anyway, maybe he could have done something to hook us up and get us in. But anyway, that's the end of me trying to kill myself. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
Excuse me for being old-fashioned.
We had a TACAN.
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, whatever happened to TACAN, which is basically like a VOR DME. We had one, but the boat was in a sort of moderate state of MCON or emissions control. Yep. So they weren't broadcasting it. It would have helped a lot to have that bearing in DME. A lot. Anybody else?
Asking for questions online, I'm not quite seeing any.
I know it's. I hope you guys can take something away from it. I know it's an unfamiliar environment. You know, you guys aren't going out and attacking white rocks on Camp Pelton. So there's an element I get that isn't exactly appropriate. However, you know, aviate, navigate, communicate. That'll save you every time.
Yeah, just taking it to your current job now. So how do you approach risk management when you're flying search and rescue, or you're flying to go pick some people up off the highway, and you're in zero in really bad, you know, meteorological conditions? I mean, how do you approach risk management based on your past experience?
So the question is, how do we approach risk management at Maryland State Police with respect to hoist, search and rescue, and medevac? At the beginning of the shift, we have a risk management worksheet that we have to complete that it's pretty generic, but it still it forces you to think about all the human factors involved in your air crew that night, because we do switch crews around a lot. And it also gets you looking more in depth at the weather factors that really might affect you within your 12-hour shift. And it assigns kind of an arbitrary number to it, you know, if it's a riskier night or not. It also, you know, things like hoist over water or hoist over mountainous terrain have a higher value. And so you're kind of like, wow, I guess I really maybe need to pay attention if I get one of those. But the bottom line is you don't know what is going to happen when the phone rings or what you're going to get assigned. You know, last night we're out in Urbana looking for a female suicidal subject, and then tonight I might get a hoist on IROC. You know, I have no idea. So a lot of it is pre-flight planning to try and game these situations out. So I've already got all the numbers figured for high rock. I know how high it is. You know, I probably already know what my power required is going to be. I got all the distances and everything. I actually have a pretty small area of operations with 4 counties that we cover, 4 or 5 actually. But, you know, still last night we almost flew all the way out to Garrett County for a motor vehicle collision with entrapment. And, you know, I found myself running out the door and not considering, hey, if I get there and it's a burn, do I have enough fuel to get to Pittsburgh? or am I going to have to refuel with this burn patient on board? I could, you know, so there's a lot of experience that goes into that. We do a lot of training, pre-flight planning, and I know that there are certain missions like hoist that are more risky than others. And I mitigate them as best I can.
Ian, just a quick comment. So you've got 8 Marine Corps trained Navy Cobra pilots.
Yes.
And at that point, there is, to get your wings as a Cobra pilot was probably a year plus.
Yeah.
Through starting in Jet Rangers and then going to, what was it, training, and then you did the RAG somewhere at some point, so you got the Cobra.
Yeah.
So every new guy sitting into one of these helicopters has 150 to 200 hours of tactical time in a jet helicopter.
Yeah.
So you got 4 of those guys, and some of them are going to be 10+ year veterans. And this to me the big takeaway. They got into this situation. Now, granted, there was a lot of tactical things going on. They landed on a ship, blah, blah, blah. But what is their minimum level of training of their least trained guy compared to us flying around in airplanes or helicopters? And they got themselves into that situation. So if it can happen to them, it can happen to us. That's kind of my big takeaway for this audience.
Yeah. Those atmospheric factors, PA, DA, winds.
Yeah.
Sort of IFR-ish conditions, man, they will bite you in a heartbeat.
and one thing I also took away from it, from my own helicopter training, it never dawned on me that, yes, of course, if in high, hot, heavy conditions, your helo is going to burn gas faster, a lot faster than it is maybe what the book is saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's.
I looked at the charts. I have my old NATOPS for the Cobra, and I actually opened them up so that I could try and get some real numbers.
Yep.
Once again, I fell back on, hey, I can't recreate the atmospheric conditions. But let me say, there is such a thing as Africa hot. And Africa is hot. I mean, I used to, we couldn't engage the air conditioner until I got to 70% NG, or turbine speed. And I could just wipe the sweat off my brow and get the engine online, because that took 2 hands before I couldn't see again. And then, and then I could wipe my eyes again once the air conditioner was online. And that was at night. I mean, it is really, really extreme. And my charts in the Cobra NATOPS only went up to like 50 degrees. Yeah. I think. And
we were just talking about this yesterday, about air conditioning in airplanes and helicopters in hot environments. It's not an option.
Yeah.
From a human factor's perspective, if you're sitting in an airplane or helicopter for 5 or 10 minutes in some of these environments inside that bubble without AC, you can't fly anymore.
Yeah,
you get dehydrated so fast.
And the Cobra is a greenhouse.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tandem seat. With the big greenhouse above you, you're going to fly.
We do need to wrap up, but I did have one question, which I don't entirely understand. Someone's asking, what's your opinion of the new helicopter fleet? Is that?
Oh, like the AH-1 Zulu, I'm guessing?
I'm not sure. Dauphin versus Leonardo.
Oh, at MSP. Oh my gosh. Well, I never flew the Dolphin. So I don't know, you got to take my assessment with a grain of salt, but the Augusta Westland 139 is an amazing machine to fly. My background is the Cobra with all its steam gauges, and I could only open my map like 3 panes before my hands ran into the canopy. And this thing just has so much help and automation. But like somebody was saying, when things get out of hand, you just disable it. I mean, you know what you want it to do. You may not be able to make the FMS do what you want it to do, but you know how to push the head, pull the tail if you're shooting a VOR approach. And there's nothing wrong with defaulting back to what you were trained how to do. Yeah. So anyway, I love it. It is such a reliable machine. It is a little bit of a Italian, like it's sort of like we're using a Ferrari in a pickup truck world. Because we're landing it in baseball fields and stuff like that to pick people up. But so the door handles break sometimes and things like that, but all in all, it's a dream to fly.
Well, thanks, Ian. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Cool. Like I said, we appreciate Roger and Ian coming out. We've got some serious expertise floating around the program here, and the purpose of any educational institution is knowledge transfer from the people who know to the people who are learning, and I think we've got a great example of that today.
Oh, would you please offer, I'll give tours
Yes.
of,
Why don't you do that? Say it
Okay.
yourself.
Once again, I've already given a couple of tours of the MSP hangar there at Frederick. I know a lot of you guys are right there at Advanced Helicopter or Frederick Flight Center are both out there. If I have to be there for 12 hours and can't leave unless we get a call. So yeah, so you know, we like work out, we clean our cars. We do whatever we can to stay busy, but you know, if one of you guys showed up, I would be happy to give you a tour. And just come see me afterwards. I'll give you my phone number and email address and stuff like that. We can totally hook that up.
Can we just publish that in Blackboard?
Yeah, sure, that's fine. Perfect. Yep.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody. We went a bit long, but I think it was all worth it. And that concludes our brief for today. The next safety awareness meeting will be, if I remember correctly, it's either May 3rd or May 4th, the first Friday in May. It'll be the last one for the semester. So everybody stay safe, fly safe. Remember that the ground is not your friend when you're flying, and you want to stay away from it until you're ready to come back. And always assume that it's going to come after you when you don't want it to. So have a great day, and Aaron, if you could stop.